Hello there. We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is RugbyPass Fan Zone after an epic weekend of Six Nations action. I sound like a presenter. I don't know why I'm doing it like that. But Ireland beat Wales with a bonus point. We've just seen France beat Italy with a bonus point. But more importantly, we watched Scotland retain the Calcutta Cup. I'm Jim Hamilton, one of the greatest Scots to have ever done it. If you don't know who I am, if you do know who I am, then you'll know that I'm talking absolute rubbish. I am also joined by my partner in crime, my mucker, my long-term friend, my Gloucester rugby partner, my Leicester legend, Freddie Burns. Freddie, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Jim, mate. How are you?
I'm good. How did that sound? Did that sound like I was a proper presenter, did it?
Yeah, I don't know what's happened to you, mate. It's brilliant. It's all good to you, mate. It's all ultimate professional now.
It's all media, of course it is. But thank you, everyone who's joining in. And for those of you who will re-watch the show, it's been a wicked weekend of ruggers. Of course it have. And at RugbyPass, we love you. And we love the energy in the room. Freddie, before we talk about the Six Nations, let's talk bigger ruggers. Because you scored 14 points at the weekend against Worcester at Leicester, didn't you?
Hey, Jim, I'm gonna say I scored 9 points because I did try a 40-meter pass off my right hand that got intercepted and they went 80 meters to score. So I'll -5 for my points tally. So let's just say 9 for the day, mate. But no, it was a good day for us. Obviously, tricky conditions like it was everywhere in the UK yesterday. And we had to bounce back from a disappointing loss at Sale the week before. So to get the bonus point win back at home, back at Matty Olywood's Welford Road was amazing, mate. So yeah, it's a good win for us. A lot to improve on, but a big one this week against Saints.
Yeah, we'll brush past that, mate. We're in the Six Nations. We don't want to talk about that. But no, good, mate. It's good to see Leicester top of the log and carving up my old club. And let's get straight into some rugby action and what you thought about the first game, the Ireland versus Wales. I think we all thought it was going to be a tough day at the office for Wales. It proved to be. I mean, Ireland, the big question, I suppose, Freddie, and you're going to be close to this because of your brother who's been in and around the setup for a few years now, is that they've not really been tested in terms of Leinster, who make up the backbone of that team. It was great to see a few Ulster boys back in the mix. James Hume getting his second cap as well, and a couple of the Connacht boys. Matt Hansen from Connacht carving up and getting man of the match. He's come from nowhere. But what do you make of Ireland and the Wales game? Are we right in what we say against Wales that they're just going to struggle this year? We said that last year and they won it.
Yeah, I don't... It was an unbelievable performance from Ireland, and I think you even go back to the autumn when they beat the All Blacks, and they beat them by going for the throat from minute one and not really letting up. And it was very much the same yesterday. And it's a joy to watch, Jim, the way they play. They mixed their power game up with a short passing game. Johnny Sexton was obviously controlling things, and they just didn't give Wales a sniff. And you know, they scored a couple of good tries. Conway obviously scored a couple of good tries. And, mate, they're just a real joy to watch, Jim, that game. As a neutral for me, obviously being English, I've got one foot in the Ireland camp with Bill sometimes. But, you know, when they play rugby like that, you just have to sit back and enjoy the spectacle that Ireland put on.
When I watch Ireland, right, and I say this with what they did against the All Blacks, when they get it right and when they're physical and when they've got the bit between the teeth, there's arguably no one better. I remember when they played out in America and there was all the emotion around Foley's passing and the number 8 jersey marked on the floor against the All Blacks. And the way that they played in that game and the way that they played against the All Blacks again in this autumn, and snapshots of what we saw at the weekend as well, like they are an absolute dream to watch. The way that their forwards play, you talk about the evolution of rugby and you talk about where the game's going, the modern day player, power, all these different things. Firstly, as a player, I would have loved to have played in that. As we see James Ryan's, we see the back of his shirt, the collisions. Freddie, as a fly half, and does your brother say anything about what it's like training with a pack of forwards like this Ireland team have got? Because they are phenomenal.
He's not said too much, but just being a fly half, mate, you know that you're generally only as good as the ball you're provided and getting on the front foot. I mean, I'm fortunate enough at the minute to play behind the Leicester pack that is pretty mean, and that Ireland squad at the minute are just taking it to another level. So for Johnny Sexton, it's great, and especially when the forwards were doing such a good job, they're then getting penalty advantage. You can then throw a little bit more caution to the wind, throw those balls over the top in windy conditions. But it was the transition for me, Jim. That was it the Ringrose try in the second half where it's a turnover and in a split second they turned defence into attack, shifted the ball through 4 or 5 pairs of hands and end up scoring in the other corner. And that's when, as a Welsh player, in that moment, you're just thinking, geez, we can't do anything right here. So it's hard to pick any faults in that Ireland performance. I think the main thing for me that was promising was the way that they, bar the intercept at the end, which was a consolation, they put their foot on the throat and they kept it there, much like they did when they beat the All Blacks in back in November.
Yeah, well, they said it on comms, didn't they? Basham's try, albeit it was a consolation try, it's so much better to get on the scoreboard than to be nailed, especially against any team. I was going to try and name a team where it's all right to be nailed. Now it's not, especially if you're the current championship holders in Wales. And what do you reckon of Wales? I mean, I've commentated, Fred, on the URC and watched Wales, and there's been loads of question marks over the regions. Not that you're going to have a huge opinion on this. You'll be playing when these games are happening as well. But we've always questioned Wales for whatever reason, or I have, and I don't know why. They always come through. Last year, we mentioned it, they won. No one thought they were going to. The World Cup, when they limped into the semi-final against South Africa, and they nearly beat them. When the chips are down, they seem to deliver. But there seems to be something going on in Wales at the minute where they're low on confidence, the energy within the kind of regions and the fans and the belief, I suppose, in the national team. Like, what have your views been on Wales, like historically, and kind of what's a snapshot of what you feel about them now? If you've got any, you don't have to have any. So I don't know.
No, I'll tell you what, Jim, it's that thing where it feels like they're going through a bit of a transition at the minute. It's a weird one. You see, obviously in Europe, I don't think any Welsh region got a win in the group stages of the European competition, which can obviously then translate into the international game. So they need to find a way to make the regions more competitive to aid the national team. But that said, I mean, Scotland go to the Principality next weekend, and off the back of the win against England, but you wouldn't put it past Wales to turn up and do a job and perform. They've got the players, they've got the know-how. But it's just interesting. They're a real question mark at the minute, Jim. You don't really know what Wales is going to turn up. And yesterday, unfortunately for them, they come up against the unbelievable Ireland team and just made them all, look pretty poor.
Yeah, I think most teams who turned up yesterday arguably would have been made to look poor. Ireland were absolutely on fire. I love how you've done your research, Fred. Wales for the wooden spoon contenders, fire, raw rugby. I hope not. But Italy did look better today. And we haven't said that for a while because they've been smoked most of the time. But I commentated on all 3 of their games in the autumn against the All Blacks, where I thought they were, I thought they were excellent against the All Blacks. I think they had 40-odd points put on them in the end. But the way that they played that game and they approached it, we did a documentary for that week during the All Blacks for RugbyPass, which has gone down an absolute storm, which gave us an insight into Kieran Crowley and this new coaching setup and this young team. There was a lot of players on show today that were very young. And I know in the end, France got away with the bonus point at 37-10, makes it look like a hammering. It didn't seem like that. Mikel Lamaro on screen, young captain, phenomenal player. In the autumn, they also played against Argentina, did well, and then they beat Uruguay. They weren't as good in that game. But again, we've been close enough to a lot of Italian players, Freddie, in recent years, haven't we? A lot of people are calling for them to be relegated out of the Six Nations. This seems to be the one, if they were to get absolutely smashed every game, there seems to be like, well, maybe there is a point where they could be relegated, should be relegated, and Romania and Georgia and these teams who play in the Tier 2 Six Nations get an opportunity. Freddie, they're a passionate country, aren't they, Italy? I know they come up short today against France. Did you see enough in the Italian team to warrant their place, or is it all about winning for them?
Obviously, it's about winning. They're going to be judged on their results. But I thought today they're real competitive. And the thing that I don't sound patronising to say feel sorry, but they started that game so well today. They scored the crossfield kick. You think, right, we're in for a game here. And then we have the line out, an intercept from Vardy at 9, and France score. And suddenly from that moment on, then you just didn't see the game going any other way. Whereas up until that moment, you were thinking, oh, the weather it was wet. France obviously had a few boys out with COVID in the camp, so they looked a little bit not quite as slick as maybe they will be in weeks to come. But with Italy, you just think, oh, here we go. They're going to be competitive. It's going to be a hell of a game. And then something happens and they just sort of fall off a little bit. But I think it's a definite step forward for them today. And in terms of relegating them and bringing other teams up, it'll be great to give teams the opportunity. But at the same time, I don't really see any teams coming up and competing at all from that tier 2. So I think Italy need to stay at the minute. I thought they were good today, and it'll be interesting to see how they go back in Rome this weekend against England.
Well, Luke says France were the worst of the two teams, at least for half of the game, and they looked a bit rusty. And that's the thing is with France, we know that they're a phenomenal team, Fred. Like, we know when they're on, they are absolutely on. That man scored a hat-trick as well there. And today, they probably in second or third gear. They look quite comfortable. I'll tell you what, I'm segueing a little bit here. Damien Penaud, for me, he is one of the best players in the world. Yeah. When you look at this French team, Fred, and they're littered with unbelievable talent. And, Untimac at 10, Dupont as well at scrum half, their forwards, their back row. Gregory Audrey was all right today. Yeah. When you look at France and everyone's saying that they're favourites, anyone who's close to the game, anyone who knows the game, and neutrals as well, what do you reckon? Like, what do you look at when you see this French team?
Yeah, they're the team that I most look forward to watching in this Six Nations. I think the way they play, obviously, if you can leave Jalibert out of your 23, you must have a pretty strong squad. I thought Woki today was unbelievable. And they'll go from strength to strength. You see, when people get COVID and they're out for 10 days, they isolate, especially during those camp periods. You look at Ireland. Ireland looked like a team today that had a week or whatever in Portugal or wherever they were in camp. Whereas that French performance today, especially at the start, and credit Italy for coming out the blocks and making it tough for them, but they looked like they were just off the boil a little bit. So I expect to see them go up a gear next week. But they're the team to watch for me. I love it, and it's going to be a massive game this weekend. Who have they got? They got Ireland in Paris, haven't they? Is that right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's going to be a hell of a game. Just hope the weather's good and both teams can play the same styles that we know they're famed for. But France for me, team to watch. I love it, and I think they'll go from strength to strength as they sort of work through that COVID situation and boys start getting back on their feet fit.
Do you see Ibanez on the phone? Obviously, to Fabien Gaultier at home, who is isolating with COVID. I mean, it's just, is that the right way to go? I don't know. Or do you just let them take the reins? Anyway, it's the French way, I suppose. Let's get into it. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of the game of the weekend. And I say it's the game of the weekend because of how close the game was. The Calcutta Cup, loads of talk in the build-up for this England team, who they were going to pick. Injuries, Owen Farrell, captain, injured. Scotland, Finn Russell versus Marcus Smith, the weather, Scotland are favourites, the Eddie Jones narrative, all the stuff you throw into the mix made this game the game of the weekend. And that's exactly what we got, Freddie. When you looked at it and you looked at the build-up, were you happy with how the game unfolded? Not from, obviously, a standpoint of being an Englishman and losing, but in terms of what we saw, because the weather conditions, you probably didn't see it on the TV, but it was absolutely shocking. It cleared up for the game. But I thought it was a brilliant game. The atmosphere in the stadium, the energy was fantastic. What do you reckon, Fred?
Yeah, I think on that, I think it's important to touch on the fact that it's unbelievable to see the fans back in the stadiums, seeing Murrayfield. I actually listened, obviously I was playing yesterday. I listened to the last 20 minutes on the radio on the way back from my game and then watched the game when I got in last night. And it was interesting. I think England would be really disappointed because actually I felt they dominated the territory game. I think they had opportunities. They got held up over the line. They kicked a few balls along the floor that I thought they could have kept in hand, but that might have been the conditions. And they were really, as much as they didn't have scoreboard pressure, I felt like they had a lot of territory pressure in that first half, and obviously got themselves in a position to control the game up until what do we call it? The incident, Dickie Gate, what do we call it? Do you know what I mean? It's
yeah, exactly, yeah.
And you know what it's like in sport. There's the shifts of momentum, and suddenly that was just a huge shift in momentum. And Scotland from there just powered on and got the win. But it was a great game, mate. They're the games you want. England, Scotland at Murrayfield, packed, edge of your seat stuff. Close scoreline, and you have to credit Scotland for the way they went out and won it.
Well, that's it. We're done here, Fred. Nothing more to say. No, we've got a lot more to say. Let's get into it. Let's rewind a little bit. Were you surprised with the selection? Were you surprised to see Henry Slade at 12, Elliot Daly at 13? Especially that Elliot Daly was told that he hadn't had enough game time, then got brought back into the squad. Like, what did you think of when you first saw the team? Because a lot of people, well, they were inexperienced, but you're still thinking, actually, you've got some quality here. So when you saw the team, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were, first and foremost, I thought it's a good team. It's a young team, but it's a good English team that can go out and definitely get the win. I did, with the conditions as they were, etc. I did feel maybe England were a bit light in the centres. You do have two unbelievable ball players and kickers in Slade and Daly. I was surprised to see Simmons at 8 over Donbrandt. I thought Donbrandt's been the inform 8, and sort of, I know Danny Kerr plays a huge part for Quins in that 8, 9, 10 combination, but still
he played well. Simmons did play well, yesterday.
Yeah, he did play well, but this, like, before the game when I saw the team announced, I did think, it was, I thought they would have gone Donbrandt, but no, fair play to Simmons. He stood up, and like I said, England would be disappointed because they had opportunities out there. Like the driving lineup, they got held up. A few balls kicked on the floor. England will look at that game and feel like they lost it because of the opportunities that they created, and obviously the incident that happened. So, people are saying the wheels have come off for England, etc. The man on screen, Marcus Smith, I thought had another unbelievable game, a great try. But England won't be too disheartened, I feel like, when there's a big swing of momentum like there was in the game. It's always going to have an effect, and England didn't cope with that too well, and Scotland powered on and got the win.
Yeah, absolutely. With the way that England played, I mean, I was surprised. I thought Scotland were going to win, right? And I weren't just saying that because I'm Scotland till I die, because I'm a little bit English as well. But I think Scotland have lost 1 in 5 games against England, and if that stat is wrong, then I'm going to blame the producers at RugbyPass. But I couldn't believe that. But when you actually think back, Calcutta Cup, 1 down in Twickenham. We lost the home game the year before at home, which was a non-starter just before COVID. And it's almost a game now where I'm not surprised that we've won. I was more surprised yesterday with how well England played. And I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. The first 20 minutes, I thought they looked really good. And Freddie, you'll be better placed to talk about this. The width they put on the ball, they got into the outside channels. You do wonder, right, whether the selection of Daly at 13 almost forced them into that kicking game. And there's that clip, and we obviously can't show it. We don't have the rights to show you the clip, but where they go down the left, they narrow Scotland's defence up, and it looks like they spoke about it on BBC half-time. It was almost like they had a 4-on-2 down that channel when Daly puts the grubber through. Do you know the play that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where you're thinking, why don't you go through the hands? But that kicks on, is it, Fred, or not? I mean, or is that a kind of pre-move to get Scotland back in the corner? Or has he just not seen it?
I think it's a tough one. It's a bit of both. In those conditions, almost the longer you have the ball, the more likely you are to turn it over rather than score a try. You almost want to go, 2-3 phase, have a look. If it's on, go. If not, turn and put it in the corner. But sometimes, me being a 10 as well, I've been there where in your head, you get this in your head and you think, right, we've got to turn them, we've got to turn them. And you just almost switch off to that opportunity. And I think that's where England will be most disappointed, is that, territory-wise, I thought they played the game outstandingly well. They played in the right areas. I thought they, managed the game really well. But in test match rugby, as you know, Jim, more than me, you only get a few opportunities. And that's one opportunity there that you've just said, where you keep it in hands, you potentially go down the touchline and score, and it opens the game up. And if you miss 1 or 2 of them, and suddenly Finn Russell turns around and hits 2 crossfield kicks, and you know what happens then. They're opportunities that are few and far between in Test match rugby. So it's in your head about kicking it, but you've got to be alive to that possibility. And I'm sure that's where England will look to improve this week is, yes, apply pressure to teams. You can't run the ball, keep the ball for 10 phases every time you've got it. But when those opportunities arise, you've got to be on it to take them and keep the ball in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of messages that popped up there. We'll go first. I think it was Colin Farrell. Let's just call him Owen Farrell. It's probably him watching this on here, where he was talking about the lap pace in their ruck and attack. I think the biggest positive from the Scotland team was the breakdown. The first up collisions, I thought around the breakdown were great. Xander Fagerson, his brother Matt Fagerson, who got man of the match as well. Who else did we have? Rory Sutherland. I thought Grant Gilchrist. Just banging boys around the breakdown and then slowing the ball up. Jamie Ritchie, again, over ball. And that was the big positive for Scotland. Again, they spoke about it at half-time. The great Martin Johnson and the OK John Barclay were talking about it, and Sam Warburton, the great. They were talking about how sustainable that is. And the other stat that just came out up there in one of the comments, I think Scotland had 7 seconds in the opposition 22. You know, that is just unheard of to go on then and win a game. And I think that just shows you, well, a couple of things. One, we didn't play that well in attack, but we still managed to win the game, and we scored when it mattered. Let's just talk about that kind of Scotland try that came off it. Darcy Graham, unbelievable break. It was obviously a pre-move to Ben White, former Leicester scrum half, who's now at London Irish on debut. Virtually his first touch. I know he passed it off the floor, but first catch of the ball, if you like, and he goes for the try. Pre-planned move. It seems like England were caught a little bit off guard. The quick line out, quick hit, and then back down that short side. Maro Itoje flies out of the line, and Darcy Graham just carves him up for fun.
Yeah, I thought it was outstanding try. It looked like it was a pre-planned move. I think Ben Youngs and Ezekiel would be disappointed that they got through, but the footwork from Darcy Graham, I thought was outstanding all day. But that footwork, just to turn what is effectively probably a 2-on-2 into a 2-on-1 and put Ben White in was class. And again, that's Test match rugby, Jim, isn't it? That opportunity arises. Like you say, they had hardly any ball in England's 22. They were absorbing an awful lot of pressure. But in that moment then, they switched on the class and they, finished off the opportunity and got the 7 points, which, they then had scoreboard pressure on England. And as much as England were dominating territory, like you say, the Scotland boys were banging the English boys back. And it's a tough afternoon then for England. So I think huge amounts of credit to Scotland. I thought they were great the way they stayed in the game, and that scoreboard pressure that I talk about is huge in Test match rugby because it forces boys to maybe play a different option or force their hand a little bit more. So, I thought it was class. It was a great try, and Scotland have got threats all over the park, and it was a hell of a try for Ben White, an old mate of mine. So it was good to see him score on his debut.
Yeah, Ben McWhite, it was good to see him go over. Fred, you mentioned something there that I'm going to latch on to. Scoreboard pressure. When Fordy came on and with Elliot Daly on the field, I know it's windy, and I'm thinking, right, they get a penalty just inside Scotland's half. Elliot Daly range, as we know, seen him for the Lions do it on a number of occasions. Monster boot. I think he was nudging them over as well in the warm-up. And they kicked to go for the line out, not a great kick, and Scotland ended up stealing the line out. Why do you think that was, that they've gone for that in a game in which was so close? Do you think they just thought they had it? I mean, you play now, so I don't know how these things work, but I'm thinking, like you've just said, he's going to get the scoreboard ticking over and put the pressure back on Scotland.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think it's hard to say because you're never on the pitch. Obviously, how things look and how things feel on the pitch are very different. Maybe England thought that they had them up front and wanted to go for the win. Maybe it was a long range kick in tough conditions, and as much as Daly has got that range, is it the percentage wise is the safer bet actually to go to touch? I think Fordy would have wanted to put a little bit more on it, but again, conditions dictate that you can't. And the main thing then is it all comes back to execution, doesn't it, Jim? You live and die by the sword. If England win the line out, drive Scotland over, score, win the game, it's a great decision. If they decide to go for goal, Daly kicks it and England end up drawing, it's a decent decision. So, mate, It's a tough one. I thought someone would have stepped up and maybe gone for the free, but I wasn't there. The conditions and stuff, you can never really tell.
And then from a fly half standpoint, but also reading some of the stuff online and some credible people in the media talking about substituting Marcus Smith for George Ford. And for the people that haven't seen Fordy play this year, Freddie's in your position, but he's been phenomenal, hasn't he? And it's been great to see you get some game time alongside him as well, playing 15. Obviously, now he's back in the England fold. He wasn't in the mix, wasn't even in the training squad. Owen Farrell gets injured, he gets called up, then he's on the bench. And you're thinking the way that Marcus Smith's gone, obviously took his try really well. He was playing really well in the match. Fordy comes on. I didn't even flinch when Fordy came on, but a lot of people did. A lot of people were like, what? Well, why are you bringing George Ford on when Marcus Smith's doing so well? Do you understand why Eddie Jones did that? Or, or can you understand why the fans maybe wanted to see Marcus Smith stay on?
Yeah, I do understand it. I think, at Leicester this year, obviously we're top of the league, and George Ford has got a huge part to play in that. He's been outstanding for us. He's also got, I think it's 77 caps to his name, 70 odd caps to his name. He's been there. He's done it at World Cups. So for me, as an England fan, whether they kept Smith on or brought Ford on, I don't think it makes much difference. For me, Fordy has been the best 10 in the Premiership, and I know people will say that he's slightly different to Marcus. Obviously, Marcus has that ability to goose step and is a little bit more maverick-like, a little bit more of a threat running. But in those games, you're bringing on a 70-odd cap England international who is playing unbelievable for his club, fully deserves to be in that England squad. So for me, I don't really see why there's too much flack going Fordy's way or Eddie's way for bringing him on. I think Marcus Smith was brilliant for the time that he was on the pitch, but Eddie Jones is a top quality coach. He knows what he's doing, and having that experience of George on the pitch, I think was probably the right call.
Well, we'll get on to the point you made about Eddie Jones knows what he's doing. He said he regrets the point of forgetting Miles to throw the ball in, but we'll talk about why he was in that position. And the big talking point around the match is the sin bin and penalty try from Luke Cowan-Dickie. So if we just set the scene, Scotland start to get a little bit on the front foot. Finn Russell puts in a great crossfield kick. Duhan van der Merwe makes some fantastic yards, doubles up again and goes to Darcy Graham on the right wing. And poor Luke Cowan-Dickie, Freddie, you might be able to tell us what the smoke planes he's doing on the wing, goes up for the kick, and naturally he's lost. You know what I mean? I've never seen a hooker have to be in that position. Darcy Graham obviously goes head and shoulders above him, and Luke Cowan-Dickie panics and just bats the ball into touch. Straight away, I'm like, well, that's a penalty try. And off the back of that, if it's a penalty try, it's a sin binning. What was your take on it? Just give us your kind of initial thoughts and then having time to digest it.
So first and foremost, I think the decision was bang on. For me, it's a penalty try, yellow card. I don't blame Cowan-Dickie. I know he's put a statement out. He put a tweet out about apologising. I don't think he should really have to apologise. Like, he's in a position that he's never had to be in before. And he actually gave himself an opportunity. He could have done anything bar that, really. He had an opportunity, I think, to actually catch the ball. But that's by the by. But I just want to go back, Jim, to the actual... The reason why that opens up is because from the scrum, Finn Russell hits a crossfield kick, right? It's bang on the money. Then what happens is Malins has a chance to chop Van der Merwe. Van der Merwe steps inside. So then suddenly Freddie Stewart, the fullback, has to engage to make the tackle. So also then Ben Young's, the alarm bells are ringing. They've done a crossfield kick. They've beaten one defender. When Freddie Stewart goes up, Joe Marcher then has to come across to cover the space in behind.
The pendulum.
Really a pendulum. But if so, I want to get this right. This is not me blaming a Malins missed tackle for the incident. But if Malins makes that tackle, Freddie Stewart stays back. Joe Marchant is probably 30 metres further across the pitch and covers the kick. It's great play. It's great bravery from Finn, like we know the player he is. But to go back to back, crossfield kick, unbelievable. And then like I said, you found Luke Cowan-Dick in a position that he's never been in, and in that situation, it's probably one of those, mate. We've all been there. He probably doesn't really think about what he's doing. He just gets up, tries to get onto it, sort of bats it away. But it is a yellow card and a penalty try. But I don't hold any blame towards Cowan-Dickey. It's an impossible position for him to be in.
No, and this is the thing. I put a tweet out as well, just saying after Luke Cowan-Dickey put out things apologising, I was like, you don't need to do that. And I start questioning myself, because we'll talk about it on here. You know, other people will be talking about it. Superficially, fans will look at that and be like, well, it's all his fault. And we know in football there's a lot of blame and the referees get blamed. I don't care what anyone says. Rugby is one of the toughest sports, if not the toughest sport on the planet. He's one of the hardest players playing the game, puts his body on the line, finds himself in a position, like you said, Freddie, that he ain't meant to be in. He's filling the void. Thanks for that insight, by the way. That has cleared up the whole reason why. I knew you'd do that. I had my thoughts, but I didn't want to embarrass myself in case it was wrong.
It should be a back rower out there as well, Jim. They should.
Well, that's what I mean.
I do think a back rower. Whether I don't know who it should have been, but maybe it should have been a Don Brandt or something like that. Probably got sucked into the midfield because, again, the crossfield kick and Van der Merwe beat in Malins. Suddenly, alarm bells. Everyone's just trying to cover for each other, so you lose that little bit of shape. And like I say, yeah. So I think a back rower should have been out there helping him out, but. Hey, it's by the by. It's unbelievable play from Finn and from Scotland, especially in that stage of the game. With you're losing the game. Unbelievable. I thought it was a great thing. I felt more sorry for Cowan-Dickey's coccyx, mate, when he sat down. It looked like it hurt that, but
yeah, it did. Yeah, well, he didn't come back on, did he? And Jamie George came on, but arguably we could have said that Jamie George should have come straight on, obviously for the line out. That was 5 metres out from England's own try line. And Joe Marler waltzes up, gets the ball, and for whatever reason, which is beyond me, and maybe this is something you can enlighten me on, Fred, whether or not the respect is there or not, that you think that you're going to win the ball against one of the best lineouts in the Championship, who were razor sharp in the game around set piece, around lineout especially, and they do the old dinky do, the old two-step log, send Don Brandt round the front. And for those of you who are watching who want to know why it was a free kick, well, Don Brandt isn't allowed to run into the 5. You're just not allowed to do that. So he's come round, kind of panicked, and Marler's just hit him. So it's not really Marler's fault, but it's more the confidence of having Marler on there and a Jamie George or a Luke Cowan-Dickey. And that, for me, I was just like, that alone, and I think that alone, I was like, you don't deserve to win the game. If you think that you can do that, then you're not in the headspace to think that you can beat Scotland, because we have got such a good line out, which we showed yesterday. And like, what is that, Fred? Like, why do you think that is? Do you think they've just thought, oh, it's Scotland, we can win it? Or, I mean, I know Eddie Jones has come out and said he made a mistake for not putting Jamie George on early, but it did cost Scotland because they ended up getting the 3 points off the back of the scrum or the turnover or whatever it was. I can't remember what it was. I watched the game once, but it was at midnight last night when I got home. But we ended up getting the 3 points, and Finn Russell slots it, and that's effectively how we won the game. Yeah,
so I just guessed at the time that the only way they could have brought the hooker on was when it was a scrum. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know you can make a substitute. So I was very surprised that they didn't bring George on to throw in at the line out. So I was actually last night trying to think, is there a law that says, because the hook has been sin binned? Do you know what I mean, Jim? Where like
no, exactly. But you might be right. I don't know. I don't think so. But I think I know what you're saying.
Because like you say, it's a definite mistake from Eddie not to get. It's tricky conditions anyway. But well, you just see you see what happened with Don Brandt being about 2 meters away from Joe Marler when he catches the ball. Do you know what I mean? And in those things, it's like, it's not a Marler or a Don Brandt anyone's fault. Like, they're trying to, no one's doing it on purpose, but they're in a position they've not been. And I feel like there is, where they should have brought a specialist on to throw in. It's pretty simple to me, Jim. If you're asking for my honest opinion, I think it's a poor error from Eddie, who's normally so sharp at that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. They are normally so sharp. And that was the one thing. It was just, they were a little bit off. and the experience. Again, look, it's easy sat here, isn't it? We're bloody
Yeah,
at home, just talking about what they should have done. Do you know what I mean? Like Joe Marler shouldn't have been throwing. It was like we've got the easy job for the fans out there. So don't think like we're just sitting here slagging people off for the sake of it. We have to talk. You know, these are big things that are happening in the game. I agree. Like, but it ain't going to happen again, is it? But we're talking about the Six Nations. We're talking about England, who've been so good in recent years. They weren't so good last year, Fred. They are a team in transition in terms of the profile of the team. How big a loss do we think that it was for England as much as a bigger win for Scotland? So how do England come back from this? They've got Italy up next, but what are the realistic expectations going forward for the England team, from what you can see with that kind of young inexperience, with their backs against the wall, and Eddie Jones probably under a little bit of pressure as well?
Mate, I'll be honest with you, I don't think anything changes for England. I think it was they had opportunities in the 64 minutes before the Cowan-Dickey incident to put points on the board, to score, to accumulate that scoreboard pressure that we spoke about. So for England, mate, obviously they've got Italy this week. I don't think they're going to make changes. They're not going to hit the panic button, mate. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. They're a quality team. They're a young, exciting team, and they get a good win against Italy this week. They're back flying and probably in contention. And I was looking at it earlier, Jim, with the fixture list and who's got to play who at home and away, and that. I think I'll be very surprised. I'll put my neck on the line, Jim. I'll be very surprised if anyone wins a Grand Slam this year. I just see teams. I see teams having to travel this weekend. Ireland going to Paris. That one could go either way. Arguably, if Ireland win that, then they could be on for it. But then Ireland have to go to England, have to go to Twickenham to play. So I don't think any team is going to win the Grand Slam this year. So for England, it'll be just getting back on the horse. It was a freak incident, the Cowan-Dickey thing. They'll learn from how they should have handled it better, but I can't see England hitting the panic button anytime soon.
No, can you see Manu Tuilagi? Do you see that hit on it? Esther Hazen today. My goodness, mate.
Well, that's the only thing, mate. You need that physicality, don't you, at test match level? And we all know Manu personally as well, and playing with him. When he's fit, there's arguably no one better in the world, or more destructive. And when you see teams like Ireland using Bundyaki, using that physicality, you need someone like Manu in your team if he's fit. So I wouldn't, maybe not this weekend, but I'd expect him to play some part in the Six Nations.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're Sale, you'd be gutted, wouldn't you? He's just come back. Yeah. You've just beaten Quins away from home. He's going around absolutely smoking people. And Fred, you know what? He might get called up to play against Italy to get him back in. Do you know what I mean? Like get him straight back in. Let's talk about Scotland, because everything we have to, in terms of, you look at the way that their fixture list is now. They've got Wales. I say they, I flip-flop between they and we. Wales away next week. Wales are vulnerable for the first time. That man, Darcy Graham, is on absolute fire at the minute. And then we've got a break, and then I think we've got France at home. And again, I still think there's this mental flaws in this French team. We've beaten them twice. Can you believe it? Beaten them at home just when the pandemic started, and then we went into lockdowns, and then we beat them away with 14 men last year in Paris. So Scotland, we are proper good now. Fred, when you look at where Scotland are, and again, being at one of the most English clubs, I was at Leicester, genuinely, hand on heart, is there that respect now amongst English people, not that it matters because we've just beaten England again, that Scotland can actually win a Six Nations? Do you think or not, honestly?
Mate, I think they could, mate. I think they've got a quality team, and the way they performed yesterday and hung in the game when they're not hung in because they're in the lead for a large part of it, but when they were under the cosh, under pressure, there was a huge buy-in. They were good, but it's that thing with Scott, didn't it, Jim? It's consistency, mate. And I think if they go to Wales this weekend and pick up a win, I think people will start standing up and saying, "Wow, here we go! Like there's a chance." But it's the age-old issue with Scotland of consistency, mate. And until they start backing up performances, I think they've obviously got big wins in them, but you need to be consistent to win the Six Nations, mate. So that's the big question mark for me, and I guess we'll find out a lot more after this weekend's game against Wales.
Of course we will. So we're looking forward to another weekend of Six Nations matches. Freddie, you got a game this weekend, or are you off? What's happening?
Yeah, we got the East Midlands Derby on Friday night.
Yes, you have. It's in the shadows, isn't it? It's a shame that your game's in the shadows. But
yeah,
well, it's not. It's not. Hey, if you're in the East Midlands, it's not in the shadows. It's the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, no, it'll be a big game, mate. Packed house, so it'll be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. From myself, Jim Hamilton, one of the greatest Scots who've ever done it, Freddie Burns, one of the best blokes who've ever done it, and all of us at RugbyPass for joining us on Fan Zone. Tell your mates, tell the pets, tell the grandparents, tell everyone, and you can join us next week around the same time after the round 2 of Six Nations fixtures. Go get them, eh?